We are going to get started here. Let's get these final. Great. I am Lindsay Anderson. I work with the Salesforce.com Foundation, and we are going to be talking about so many apps, so little time here this morning. Safe harbor statement one more time for you guys. So what are you guys doing here? How many of you guys have heard of the App Exchange? Sounds good. How many of you guys have been on the App Exchange? Even better. Sounds good. So our goal of this session this morning is to talk to you a little bit about how to expand your use of Salesforce beyond what you're doing right now. So organizations, companies come to Salesforce wanting the CRM platform that they can manage their constituents. And what we want to talk about and show you through Alicia and Mark, who are going to join me up here in the next little bit, is to think about sort of moving it beyond this online Rolodex and actually beginning to track your programs, actually increase your communications with your constituents, do event management, all of these amazing things that you have the opportunity to get your hands on through the App Exchange. So for those of you guys that are unfamiliar with the App Exchange, it's sort of like the common key tag that we've been talking about. It's the online iTunes sort of marketplace for applications to extend your use of Salesforce. We have over 800 applications on the App Exchange right now, and what is exciting for our community is that we have over 100 of those applications that have joined in the Power of Us program, so they are either donated or discounted to nonprofit organizations. And a month ago, we actually included services now on the App Exchange. So we're putting all of our partners in one place. So we're going to actually go out to the App Exchange real quick. So here we are, and it looks like most of you guys have been on here before, so we're not going to undo too much. But I just wanted to point out that now not only searching for applications, you can also search for services. So if you're wanting to find a partner to help you with that implementation or re-implementation of Salesforce, you can actually search. You can look on, keywords, donor management, event registration, these things that you're thinking about expanding your use of Salesforce, and find both service providers and solutions themselves. And then I also just want to make sure that you guys are looking, when you do the view more, that you are looking through this discounted for nonprofits list and looking at the specific solutions that are for both nonprofit and education entities up here. So coming back. So the other thing that's exciting to know is that we can actually track on our end the top nonprofit App Exchange installs. How many of you guys are using Vertical Response? So that, as you guys can see, is the top one. It looks like about half of you guys are using it. Are there other applications that you guys are using that you're fired up about? You want to shout any of those out? ClickTools. I love ClickTools. Anything else? Form Assembly. ClickTools Form Assembly. A little competition going on there. Anything else? What was that? Demand Tools, Clean Data. Sounds great. So you guys can see, we're not going to be spending today, we're not going to talk about, giving you a list of the best tools. We want you guys to explore the tools on there. So we're going to actually go through a nice little process for you to go through how you can actually get these tools to stick within your organization. So we have sort of 4 themes that we're going to walk through, and then I'm going to have Mark and Alicia come up, and Alicia's going to kick it off and walk through sort of these first 2 steps, and then Mark's going to take it over with the last 2. So the first step is to explore. Actually get on the App Exchange. There are so many opportunities out there. There's 800 applications. 100 of those are donated and discounted for you guys. There's a ton more that are absolutely free. So take some time. Actually test out those applications. And the second tip that we have for you is to test them. So actually look and explore, see what's available, and then test them. You can download, you can trial them for free, same way that you can utilize the trial of Salesforce before you actually purchase it or get it donated. Then the third step is to be strategic about deployment. You should try all these tools, and then you're going to choose maybe 1 or 2 to actually deploy within your organization. So Mark's going to talk about some great tips for you about how he's gotten his organization to deploy these tools. And then once you deploy them, you want to make them sticky for your organization. So it's only good if it's going to be used, right? It's the same thing with all of Salesforce. you're putting all this stuff into these users that maybe aren't excited about technology or Salesforce at all. So he's going to talk a little bit about how you can actually get these tools to be used on a really deep basis and how it's going to be such a positive benefit for your entire organization. So I'm going to ask Alicia to come up here, and I'm going to just let her introduce herself, but fantastic Bay Area Video Coalition, and Alicia Schmidt, come on up.
Thanks, Lindsay. My name is Alicia. As she said, I'm from the Bay Area Video Coalition, or as we're known around town, BAVAC. We're a 33-year-old media arts and technology organization here in San Francisco. We have a staff of about 35 folks. Rather than talk about what BAVAC does, I'm going to be kind of a bad marketing person today, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we do at Salesforce CRM. As you can see, it's a long list, and it gets longer every day. We are really adamant about squeezing every drop of value out of Salesforce that we can, so we work every day to do that, and the App Exchange is one of the ways that we are really able to do that. Just a couple years ago, BAVAC was trying to do all these things with multiple databases and many Excel spreadsheets, which wasn't really working for us. As you can see from this list, we use Salesforce to do everything from tracking our internal IT issues. We actually have several locations and computer labs, so it's helpful for us to do that. We also track youth in our after-school programs. We use it to schedule and enroll students in classes. We also use it for development and marketing, and we use it for some fee-for-service activities like media preservation for cultural institutions. If you want to know more about BAVAC, you can find us at bavac.org. So why does BAVAC use the App Exchange? Like most nonprofits, we have limited resources, both financial and staff resources. If any of you have unlimited resources, please let me know, because I'm looking for a job if that's you. In reality, we have one staff person who spends about 20% of their time on Salesforce. And so the App Exchange is really a way for us to get quick and efficient solutions to some of our very specific needs. These are often apps that we might be able to build ourselves, but we just don't have the time or energy to really devote to that. We also look to the App Exchange to help us with staff adoption. We've found some apps that make tasks easier for our staff so that they actually want to use Salesforce. Just a quick example of that, there's a very sexily named app called Mass Edit or Update in List View, which has pretty much changed the world of our education administrator. Our Salesforce admin at the time was actually looking for a different solution in the App Exchange when he came across the Mass Edit app. Knowing our business process, he immediately knew that this particular app would be helpful to us. Our education administrator schedules about 800 classes a year, so she has to schedule several classes that are the same over different periods during the year. So rather than having to clone all those class meetings and then go into individual sections and change all the fields, she can actually use a custom view, select the class meetings that she wants to edit, and click Mass Edit. And this allows her to edit multiple class meetings at once, changing only those fields that need to be changed, so date and time, certain requirements. This saves her a lot of time. It gives her extra time to do Facebook and other things, right? Actually, it gives her more time to interact with our clients, which we really appreciate. Why else do we use the App Exchange? Testing apps gives us a better sense of what is possible. BAVAC is a media technology organization. We like to do things ourselves. We like to tinker with things if we can. So sometimes we get our best ideas when we're actually testing other apps. For instance, we went to the App Exchange to try and find an app to do time tracking for our staff, to do government and grant reporting. We checked out a few apps like Time Tracking, Professional Services Timer, a few others. They didn't meet our specific needs, so we took what we learned from testing those apps to create our own custom app. We built a custom time tracking app using a custom object, some web-to-anything code, a little bit of PHP programming, and now we have an online form that our staff fills out that actually helps our accounting department track specific time percentages for our government contracts. So that was super helpful for us. Finally, Bayvac uses the App Exchange to sort of get a glimpse into the future of Salesforce. Right now, we're testing and playing with an app called CMS Force. How many are you familiar with CMS Force? Not very many. If you're not, you should get familiar with it. It's a content management system application from Force.com Labs. For those of you who don't know, Force.com Labs are actually apps created by Salesforce employees that are pushed out to the community for free. There was actually a nice European man named David who works for Salesforce who was here yesterday presenting, who actually created the CMS Force application by himself and actually provides support for it by himself, which is awesome. Among other things, CMS Force allows users to create and edit web pages using WYSIWYG editor, which is a what you see is what you can get editor. It's a much easier way to get introduced to the site's technology for people like me who don't know Apex and Visualforce code. It's an easy way to sort of get into the technology, try some things with sites, helped us start building landing pages on our sites using sites. CMS Force, I believe, is one of the more popular apps on the App Exchange right now. From that popularity, you might be able to gauge where that functionality might eventually become native in Salesforce down the road. It's just a guess on our part, but you can kind of see where Salesforce might be building native functionality in the future. If you've been to some of the site's sessions this week, you also know that they're working on drag and drop templating, which will also be super awesome and allow people like us to actually implement sites very quickly and easily. So beyond the apps I've already mentioned, you can see here some apps that we love. Again, not very sexily named apps, but very functional. The Duplicate Contact Blocker, Congo Merge is a great app. Demand Tools, if you're doing any sort of data migration or data scrubbing, Demand Tools is an awesome app. Vertical Response we've talked about, Mass Update and Mass Edit from List View, and Sales Quotes from Line Items, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Apps we're testing right now includes Informatica, which is an app that lets us integrate information with our website. So we have an open source CMS called Joomla. We're trying to figure out a way to integrate that with our Salesforce instance. And so Informatica is one of the apps that we're testing to see if that's going to work for us. Payment Connect is another payment processing app that we're testing. You might have heard about it yesterday if you were in the session with Invisible Children, who's using that app very successfully right now. CMS Force, also, as I mentioned, we are testing. There's a lot of new apps all the time, and since we don't live and breathe Salesforce, sorry, Lindsay, we generally keep up by subscribing to the App Exchange newsletter and following the App Exchange tweets on what my mom likes to call the Twitter. So very simply, what the App Exchange does for Bayvac is it lets us take full advantage of the Salesforce CRM in order to work smarter. Basically, the less time we spend on administration, the more time we get to do the meaningful work of providing quality programs and working to complete our mission. As you might have seen in the new Winter 10 release or heard this past Wednesday, creating real-time quotes will soon be part of the native functionality of Salesforce. Of course, a couple years ago, when Bayvac first implemented Salesforce, that wasn't available, so we needed a quote application at the time that would allow our 1.5 staff members in our media preservation department to create complex quotes for cultural institutions and museums who wanted to preserve their video or audio collections. So our Salesforce administrator at the time went to the App Exchange. He tested quite a few quote applications. I think at the time there were 20 or 30 of them out there. They're still out there, although I imagine there'll be less next year. And he asked our relevant staff to do some testing in the sandbox and then settled on the free version, and again, very functionally named Sales Quotes with Line Items app from our friends at the Force.com Labs. In a week, we had a complex quote application running, an app that would have taken much more time and effort for us to build ourselves. So I'm just going to run through quickly how this app currently works for us. The quote process starts when our preservation staff person receives an email notification that someone has submitted a web-to-lead inquiry via our website. They then convert the lead and create a preservation opportunity attached to that contact and or organization. Quotes are related to an opportunity. So when the opportunity is created, then we get a related quotes list from which we can create a button to create a new quote. After we fill in the basic quote information and save, then we get a quote detail page. This app actually very nicely lays out the steps of making a quote for us right there in a list, which is great because then our preservation interns can actually do a lot of this quote process for us and submit the quote for approval. So it goes to a staff person. But with very little training, they're able to create these complex quotes for us very quickly. So we're just going to click on the links to follow the steps. And the first thing we do is add products to the quote. The quote product list comes from a price book, which is a list of our sort of complex video and audio services and pricing. The price books are created in their own custom object, where you can add and put together any number of different catalogs of products or services, including descriptions, prices, and fees. Again, this custom object was installed as part of the Quotes app. These products can be anything, training hours, DVDs, anything depending on what your specific services are. Then we edit the quote line items if needed. You can add a line description, or add a discount, adjust the price, etc. Then we're taken back to our quote screen where the products have been added, and it's time to calculate the quote amount, which totals up your net prices. And then you can submit the quote for approval if you need it, and copy the details to the related opportunity. Once the quote is approved, then we can export the quote and send it to our contact. So we just click the Export Quote button on the opportunity. In our configuration, the Export Quote button actually takes you to another app on the AppExchange, which is CongaMerge, where we can choose our template, our contact, and then email or print the quote. Again, this process is much easier probably in the native quotes application that is coming out, but at the time, this was our best solution. We usually send our quotes directly out of Salesforce using email, and you can see there down at the bottom that the quote is attached. This is what the quote looks like when it gets attached. It's a PDF. We created a custom quote template, and as you can see, it contains the quote line items and the total. The app also includes some custom reports, which has been a godsend for our accounting department in terms of projecting potential income. This also allows us to track a lot of these quotes. These quotes are often used by other nonprofits as budgets, project budgets. So they'll take these quotes and go out to foundation funders to try and raise money around these quotes as budgets so they can raise money to preserve their collections. So ultimately, the Quotes app helps our preservation staff members track and organize our quotes, quickly price out projects with complicated services, and keep and track potential income for our accounting staff in a very simple and easy way. That's pretty much sales quotes for line items. The AppExchange has been incredibly helpful to us in extending the usefulness of our Salesforce implementation. We're pretty amazed that we get to work with a solution that is so powerful, and it only becomes more powerful as you add apps from the AppExchange. Finally, it's pretty simple to find, try, and test applications, even for a non-technical person like myself. If anyone was going to break the system, I swear it would have been Bayvac, and that hasn't happened so far. So I'm guessing you guys are pretty safe. I don't know you that well, but I'm taking a stab at it. Speaking of breaking things, I'm actually going to turn things over now to Mark Baseman, who is going to talk about best practices and how you should really test and work on user adoption with your applications. Thanks.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, Alicia. That was great. It's always great to see a real-life use case, so thank you for walking us through that. So my name is Mark Baseman, and I'm the technology manager at Root Cause, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys today about all the possibilities and how you can make some of these apps that you've seen stick within your organization. So I know this is a very busy slide. We tried to say no bullets, but there are a couple bullets on here, obviously. here's how we're using Salesforce. You can see across the different areas of our organization, IT support, Salesforce. We're actually using it for our business development pipeline. So Root Cause is a nonprofit that does essentially consulting services, so stuff like performance measurement for nonprofits, social impact investing, like the session that you heard earlier. Root Cause is sort of right there in that space. So we're using Salesforce as much as we can. Check out our website. So key takeaways from my piece is awareness, how to keep up with what's available, some strategy, so effective testing and deploying within your organization, and then adoption, making your new apps sticky. We could have a whole session just on adoption, so I'll kind of apologize in advance that I've got a lot of stuff in there, but we could just do a session on that. So how do you keep your virtual eyes open? Now, I apologize, some of the colors didn't come through here, but basically there's a whole bunch of resources that are available that everybody should know about. You've got your foundation website, Salesforce Ideas. There's a nonprofit section now in Ideas where you can see things. And there's best practices on the community site. Again, just because something says sales or marketing doesn't mean it's not useful for your nonprofit, right? Think marketing is your fundraising team, right? They're going to do an annual appeal. They still need to talk to people. So don't get hung up on the words. Some people get hung up on the word Salesforce, but I guess if you're here, then you probably got over that hump pretty quick. There's a bunch of blogs that are out there. The Salesforce official blogs. We saw the AppExchange blog. Steve Anderson's blog, who now works for the foundation, Judy Sohn's blog, Mom at Home, Nonprofit CRM, which is a small plug for myself and a couple of other people in here. There are the forums, so there's the Google group, the NPSF Google group. If people don't know what that is now, I will give you the link in a minute, so teaser. And then there's also local user groups, so don't forget that if we could just get a show of hands, who here attends their local user group? Okay, there are a lot of people in this room that did not raise their hand. You should definitely talk to a foundation person about a local user group. And if you go to usergroups.salesforce.com, there's a whole nonprofit section. It's a great way to network with other people who are doing really cool, interesting stuff. So just a screenshot of the AppExchange blog. This is great because they have an app of the week. So every week you can say, hey, there's some new app coming up. So this spam check from ArrowPoint, this is a way to keep spam out of Salesforce. So this is basically a way on your web to lead page to add a little CAPTCHA at the bottom so that you can actually prevent spam robots from submitting stuff. So here's another great app. And this is on the AppExchange blog. The NPSF group, I've said it before, I'll say it again, this is the best resource for nonprofits who are using Salesforce. It's a Google group, so if you don't have a Google or Gmail account, go get one. You can Google it, haha. But definitely check this out. There's so much information that's up there. Go. So my shameless plug here is the blog that I have with a couple of other folks here in this room, nonprofitcrm.org. We're basically blogging about nonprofits using Salesforce. We're actually looking for additional contributors because everybody gets so wrapped up in the day-to-day program work that we're not blogging enough. So if you are interested in contributing to this blog, please come talk to me. So now let me move into kind of effective testing and deploying here. You can see my technical strategy. Basically, how can you test applications? So who here knows about the sandboxes? Just a show of hands. Wow, I am impressed. Thank goodness that you guys know about them. Now, how many of you guys are using your sandboxes? Okay, slightly less, but still good. Good show of hands. You have 7 sandboxes to play in. A sandbox is essentially a snapshot of your current Salesforce configuration in like a mirror image or a duplicate sandbox. The idea of the sandbox is this is where you can go play. This is where you can test out those crazy sales quotes, line items, applications. Whatever you want to try, the sandbox is the place to do it. And I'm going to go into a little bit of technical detail, but I'll try to keep it high level so you guys don't fall asleep. I know it's been a late night. So there's a couple of different types of sandboxes. The full sandbox is just ignore that one because it costs money, and we're nonprofits, so we're always looking at money. The configuration only and the developer sandbox are, I know, sorry, Brian, I see you in the back. No, you shouldn't ignore it because the full sandbox is good too. Anyway, but these guys, these bottom ones are included in the donation, so that's why I would suggest that you check them out. Bottom line is it's a configuration only. It doesn't come over with data. Okay, so that's important to note. The full sandbox does come with your data. So why might you want to use these sandboxes? One of the user adoption sessions that I went to earlier in the week, I think like Carlos, I'm always trying to get people to use that system. You can use a sandbox just for a training environment. So you could actually have a sandbox login so that people can go in, put in some sample data, test data, and not be messing up the real system, right? I don't want people putting in a bunch of fake donations because then I have to filter it out when I go do my reports. So use the sandbox to do that. If you want to do your own development, the sandbox is the place to do it. And if you are working with a consultant or you want to do kind of separate testing, again, use your sandbox. So how do you set up your sandboxes? So let me just say these are screenshots because amazingly, the internet has not been so reliable at the cloud conference. I don't know if anybody else has found that. But so these are all screenshots. So I'll just say that up front. Basically, you want to go to Setup. And then all the way on the bottom there, you can see under Data Management, Sandbox. So you can see right now, I've got 2 sandboxes. Just a word of advice here. Don't name them Sandbox 1 and Sandbox 2 like I did. Name them what you're going to use them for. So name them something like training or development or testing. I continually forget which is Sandbox 1 and which is Sandbox 2. So just name them appropriately. I could, of course, have created more. I didn't do that. It's too much work. You can see here, by the way, that you can refresh a sandbox. So this copied on is when that snapshot was taken. Sort of like a date time stamp in the lower right of a picture. And you can refresh your sandboxes. And usually refreshing takes not a whole lot of time. So how do you log into your sandbox? Basically, when you log in, you're just going to put a dot and then your sandbox name at the end. So it's sort of like your email address plus the little sandbox name. And then the password is the same password that you use. Once you're logged in, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a thing in red that says, hey, you're in this sandbox. So it kind of is the alert to you, the user, that you're logged into your sandbox, not your normal instance. So let's talk about a use case. So how I might actually do this in my production organization. So we don't have an HR department. We basically have an operations team of like 2 or 3 people. We're a small organization. So we want to try out this new HR recruiting app, which we saw. It looked cool on the App Exchange, but I don't want to put that right into production, right? People are going to freak out. There's something new in there. Thank you. I know. But the deal is, go install this recruiting app in your sandbox, test it out first. So what's great is Salesforce makes it so easy to do this. Just choose sandbox test environment. Don't choose production. And then when you ask for the login, you'll just put in your sandbox login information. Okay? Is this clear? Everybody okay with it? Okay, I see some heads. Good. So it's that simple. Now, this is where I think your eyes may start to glaze over. I would encourage you not to do that, because what you can do is you can set security settings just for certain groups of people. So you can use roles and profiles. I know this is a little bit techie, bear with me, but you can use profiles to say, hey, I want people to have access to this application as opposed to have access to every single thing. So I have a new profile here called HR Beta Tester. And I'm giving this HR Beta Tester full access to this recruiting application. Now, this recruiting application, normally, if I could install, my 2 choices are give it to just the administrator, give it to everybody. This lets me kind of pick and choose who I want to have access to this, right? And then this HR Beta Tester, I'm going to assign this profile to 1 or 2 people just to check it out. So again, if you're going in and configuring your roles and profiles here, in the profile, you're actually going to maybe turn that recruiting app on by default. So this is kind of a compilation of a bunch of different screenshots. You'll never find all these on one screen. But if you look in your app settings, in the profile configuration, you'll be able to turn on those apps and custom object permissions. Okay? And you can get to field level security, right? So you can go right down to the field level to tweak stuff on and off. Maybe you want to turn, for example, compensation information. You want to limit that. So here's where you would do that in the profile. So let me talk about, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about change sets. So there was our use case of our HR, and we're still kind of following that through. Change sets are totally your new best friend. This is something that just came out in Winter 10, and basically it's a way to move your sandbox changes to production. So when you have a prepackaged app from the App Exchange, right, it's very easy to install into your beta environment or install into your production. But if you're making a bunch of tweaks and changes, and you don't want to make those in your production instance, you want to make them in your sandbox, there's no way other than using the IDE, which is probably over some folks' heads in this room, this is a way in which you can use Salesforce itself, all point and click, to move your changes from your sandbox into production. So why might you use these? You have a bunch of customizations in your sandbox. You're testing before you're going live, which is always a good thing. And you don't know how to use Eclipse. That's okay. Doesn't matter. I still like you. So what's in a change set? This slide violates the bullet rule, but that's okay. All of these things can be included in a change set. So you name it, whether it's Apex code, S-controls, reports, letterhead, all this stuff you can bundle up in your change set. So this is the 4-step process to use change sets. I apologize, it's a little geeky, but stay with me, it's good. Step 1, you're going to authorize your deployment connections. So that sounds really complicated, but it's pretty easy. I'm going to step you through each stage. Step 2, create your outbound change set. So this is the group of changes that you want to bundle up and push live. Step 3, upload it. Step 4, review the inbound change and deploy. So let's step through each one of these things. Great. Yeah, that color came out great. So in your deployment connections, so here's where you go. You're going to go into Setup, and then there's a whole new Deploy section over here, which has got your deployment connections. So you can see there's the deployment connections, the outbound change sets, the inbound change sets, and you can monitor your deployments. So what you're going to do is you're going to check the deployment connections. In production, you can see I'm logged into production basically because I put a big blue production box over there. You're going to allow your inbound change sets, and then you're going to look for the green happy arrow. So this green arrow indicates that it's OK. When you first go in here, it's going to be a little broken red arrow. So you'll need to set this up first before you actually do it. Then, so this is just the next level of detail here. You're just going to make sure you've got that allow inbound changes checked in your production environment, and then save it. So next step, let's create that outbound change set in the sandbox. So these are all the changes that I want to bundle up and push live. So in the change set area, I'm sorry, I don't have the far left, but it's in the same set of, in the menu, in that change sets section. You are going to add your change set components. So these are all the different pieces that you want to bundle up. And you're going to bundle up all these change set components. And it's sort of like building your own private App Exchange application. It's kind of like the same idea, where you're getting your custom objects, your custom fields, whatever changes you want to wrap up. And then you're going to click that upload button. And then just a reminder, what's included, all that stuff. So then you're going to upload from Sandbox. So really, all you're doing is you've got your upload details, which tells you where your target is. You're going to your production organization, then you click upload. And then finally, in production, you're going to get your inbound change sets here. You're going to review it, And here's my test change. I've given the change set a name. Again, you probably don't want to use something called test change that I've indicated here. You probably want to do something like a version number or something that describes what the application is, so that when you review your change sets that have been uploaded, you can see like, oh, this is version 1, version 2. So again, starting to think more about making changes in a systematic way as opposed to maybe just ad hoc throwing stuff up there. So then you literally click the deploy button, and you've got your recruiting application now live in production. So, of course, I could have, since this is an app from the App Exchange, I could have just installed that straight into production. But I wanted to install it in my sandbox first to really test it out and make sure it has everything I wanted. Like Alicia, I think there are apps that are out there that are not exactly what you want, but they're kind of close. So the sandbox for me is a way to just tweak everything and make it the way that I want to use it. And then it's live. So it was a little geeky, and I apologize, but this is so useful. So definitely I encourage you to walk out of here and give these a try in your organization. So we've talked about sort of the technical side of change. Let's talk about making your new apps sticky and the people side of change. And again, we can have a whole session just on this. I'll do my best to get through this, but you can talk to me afterwards. I have lots to say about user adoption. So kind of the first thing I would say is let people know early that change is coming. And you want to sort of keep it in mind, right? So you kind of announce it, and people start freaking out. But if you announce it far enough in advance and you sort of keep it on their radar, at least people are aware of it. So there's that awareness level of change is coming, but don't freak out. So you want to talk to the tough cookies first. And you know who these folks are in your organization probably as well as I do. These are the folks that if you enlist them right off the bat and get their buy-in, these are the people who are going to be your biggest allies. I don't know if Brad Dudding is here, but he's from the Center for Employment Opportunities. He had a particular user adoption challenge, and we really went after the people who were going to be the most resistant to change. And once we got their buy-in, and those conversations, by the way, start with the mission and start with the value that they're going to get out of a system like this. They don't start with, here's this new thing. Because starting with here's the new shiny ball that you're just going to take away from your caseload because you have to enter data, it's the wrong way to have that conversation. You really need to start with the common mission that you're all working towards. And then once people get that you're just trying to help them do their jobs better, then I'm telling you, it's a sea change. It's great. You want to test pilot with a small group. Don't try to roll this out to a large organization. Even if you have a small org, test with 1 or 2 people, because honestly, the feedback that you'll get from this test group is going to be super valuable, and it's going to highlight stuff that you've never even thought about, and test pilot with those people. And in this case, you probably want to pick a little bit more advanced users so that you get those folks kind of on board so they're not super resistant just to the pilot process. Use help text as much as possible. So help text on standard fields is now in the winter release. Put these little orange bubbles. Who here uses the help text bubbles? Okay, I see a lot of hands. Everybody should have raised their hand there. I cannot stress enough how helpful this is. And the way that I like to use this is we like to put as detailed a description as we can in for each of these custom fields. And now that it's on the standard fields, we can even talk about standards for things, right? Even if it's already in the manual that everybody's supposed to have read, if you have a little bubble there that says, you know what, this is what you want to name something, and this is the way that the donation should be named, it goes a long way towards helping it. And then when stuff comes and it's wrong, it's like, well, didn't you guys just move your mouse over that little orange bubble, please? So you get the idea. And I did mention it just now, but documentation. So you want to sort of get to people in whatever learning format they're comfortable with. So have a user manual, of course, so you get a big sheaf of paper. Make sure that user manual is online so people can download it. I really love screencasts. I don't know if people have used Jing at all, but Jing is my tool of choice. It is free. Jingproject.com is the website for Jing. And this, what I've done is there is a web tab. So this thing that says training documents on the right is actually showing a page from our intranet which has all of this information. So what we've done is we've embedded the documentation in the application itself. Does everybody know what a web tab is? Web tab. Okay. Like 2 people raise their hands. Basically, when you create a custom object, it creates a tab, right? Well, you can create your own tab and have it just show a website inside that tab. And you can have it show the website with or without that left-hand sidebar. So when you click on that tab, basically it's just showing a web page. So you could show Google or Yahoo or whatever. So I could have a Google tab up here. I'm not going to, it's a little bit out of scope for the presentation, but I'm happy to show people afterwards how to create a web tab. But it's very straightforward. And finally, and maybe this should be first, but make a plan. Like have your timeline all laid out, have your communication strategy laid out for user adoption. There have been some great sessions at the conference so far about this, but if you don't have a plan for how this is all going to go and how it's all going to flow, then you're going to end up like that poor guy. So key takeaways. Some awareness we talked about, how to keep up with what's available, all those websites, all those blogs. Strategy, test and deploy. Use those sandboxes. Don't be shy. And then make those apps sticky within your nonprofit. And I'll turn it back to Lindsay. Thanks, everybody.
So fantastic job, both of you guys. It's exciting to see what you guys are up to. Just a quick review of what we've went through today so far. So we talked a little bit about exploring applications. Alicia talked about how they do that at BayVac, and then testing those applications out before you actually send them out into your install base. Mark did such a fantastic job of talking about deploying those applications and making them sticky within the organizations. So finally, make sure you complete that online survey. We really do love and review that feedback to make sure that we are giving you the best sessions during Dreamforce. And finally, we want to open it up for some Q&A. So you guys want to come up and does anyone have any questions here? Yeah, go for it.
Will the nonprofits get content soon?
That is a great question that I don't know the answer of.
But didn't we hear on Wednesday?
Yes, yeah, you did hear that, and we'll keep you informed in the near future about that. Yeah, the question was, thank you guys, and if you guys want to actually, if you have questions, come up to the microphone. That's helpful for the guys that are going to be listening to this on the recording. The question was if content was going to be included within the nonprofit world in the near future, and I don't know the answer to that, so we will find out soon.
We want to know the answer too.
Great.
Hi there. I've read that there's a rule of thumb that you should only add a couple of App Exchange apps at a time, or like limit the number that you're including in your implementation. And I saw quite a few in a couple of, especially in yours. So is there a rule of thumb of how many you should add, and is there a sort of a limit to what you should be adding?
Well, I think one of the reasons I'm standing up here today is because BayVac is very active in trying applications, and Salesforce is able to see that. So they know that we test as many things as we can. We try out a bunch of things as we can. As far as I can tell, there's no downside to it if you have the time and inclination to do it, and it's working for you. If it really is adding functionality to your system, I think that's great. We did have an overzealous director of technology at one point, who did install, went a little crazy on the App Exchange and installed some things that weren't really working for us, but it was very easy for us to uninstall and scale back when we needed to. I don't recommend that as a best practice, but if that happens, it's very easy to sort of scale things back if you need to.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, it's it's all about managing change, right? And to manage a whole bunch of change at once by installing 5 or 6 or more applications from the AppExchange or custom apps can be overwhelming. But that's why you've got those sandboxes. Don't be shy with, the whole point is to play in them and install all those apps. So, in terms of making things live, I think probably what was successful for you guys is you didn't turn on everything at once, but you really started with a couple of apps and, worked with the org together to get it to work. Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Is there a way to tell if any of the apps will conflict with each other? I don't know the best way to say that, but if they'd be either competing or conflicting with objects.
I don't know of any way. I'm going to install it and try to break it, like Alicia's slide.
I think if you test it in your sandbox, you'll see very quickly if it's interfering with some of your other applications or if it's not working with some custom objects that you've set up. I think the key is really just to try it. Put it in your sandbox and test it.
Suppose that you put everything in your sandbox, you've tested it, and then you install it, and there's things that aren't working. Do you have to put it back into the sandbox, or can you fix any changes? Have you guys ever had to do any of that?
I've had to do some of that where, the bottom line is not working can encompass a whole bunch of stuff, right? Not working could be something is actually broken, or not working is it doesn't work for the people.
Right, any minor changes,
Yeah. So absolutely. Here's my development process. I'll share this with everybody. Is I put it in the sandbox. We kind of get it, to about 80% of where it needs to be. We test pilot with that group. Then we push it live, and there are always tweaks and changes to be made in the live production instance. For minor stuff like that, like I'm comfortable doing that in production. For a larger organization or someone like Carlos and Endeavor where it's like global in 9 countries, maybe that wouldn't work. But for my small org, I'm comfortable making those changes. And then I refresh the sandbox so that the sandbox has the latest changes that I've made. And that's a one-click thing, as we saw in that slide earlier. Yep, good question.
Other questions you guys have?
Is this going to be recorded? Those slides went so quick. I'd like to have a copy, especially.
Yes, it will be recorded. So on the Dreamforce website, all of the sessions are recorded after. So you guys definitely check out the ones that you missed or weren't able to get into. No final questions? Great. Well, thank you guys all for joining us today.